welcome to another episode of Weird Ass History with Becca. I'm gonna try something different this time. I'm gonna try and say everything all in one video rather than taking a whole bunch of different ones because my audio is odd and I need a microphone, so I'm gonna have to do it this way. Today's episode is on the history of eating mummies as well as using it for paint. So we're going to start with the history of eating it because that started first, I guess. I can't find any actual resources telling me when they stopped using mummies for medicine. The last case that I can find of something called a mummy unwrapping party was in 1857. So it wasn't that long ago. It was like 170 years ago. But yeah, so eating mummies was popular in between the 12th and the 17th centuries for about 500 years. 5 or 600. It was based on the supposed properties of bitumen. Although most of the mummies that they found were actually embalmed with resin, not with bitumen, like they thought. Mumia, which is what they called it, was misinterpreted as mummy when imported natural bitumen supplies ran short. So basically, they ran out of mumia, which was bitumen, and they were just like, oh, well, it also means mummy, which, no, it didn't. So what they did is they started importing full mummies and would grind up their remains and use that instead of, being smart about things. Suppliers substituted rare mumia exudate with full mummies, embalmed or desiccated. After Egypt banned the shipment of mumia in the 16th century, apothecaries began to sell fraudulent mumia prepared by embalming and desiccating fresh corpses. So they would go out and find fresh corpses. Usually they were executed murderers, and they would embalm their bodies and use those instead of mummies. Mumia means mineral pitch in Arabic. It's a type of resinous bitumen found in Western Asia. It's used curatively and in traditional Islamic medicine. It's translated as pis asphaltus in ancient Greek medicine. In medieval European medicine, it was translated into Latin as mumia, meaning a bituminous medicine from Persia, and mummy, which is where the misinterpretation comes from. Merchants and apothecaries dispensed expensive mumia bitumen, and it was thought to be an effective cure-all for many ailments, and also an aphrodisiac, which is gross to me, because, why would that get you started? Oh, honey, you better hurry. I ate the mummy. We're running out of time. Supplies ran short in the 12th centuries. Mumia was misinterpreted as mummy, so it's basically started in the 12th century when mumia was misinterpreted. The word's meaning expanded to a black resinous exudate scraped out from embalmed Egyptian mummies. Suppliers substituted rare mumia exudate with full Egyptian mummies. And bitumen is mainly known as just asphalt now. It's sticky, black, highly viscous liquid or semi-solid form of petroleum. So it's basically petroleum, and the asphalt that we have now is petroleum mixed with a construction aggregate that makes it solidify and stick together. It's found in natural deposits or maybe a refined product and is classified as pitch. It's abundant in the Middle East. It's formed in geological basins, and it is the remains of tiny plants and animals. Greek physician Dioscorides wrote that bitumen from the Dead Sea was best for medicine. Scientists would later learn that bitumen also has antimicrobial factors, which means it kills microorganisms like antibiotics and antifungals do. It's also biocidal, which means it's intended to destroy, deter, and render harmless any harmful organism that it comes into contact with. It also contains sulfur, which sounds bad. That's exactly what I thought when I first read it. I was like, sulfur? That doesn't sound like you should be eating that. But it actually, we need sulfur. Sulfur builds and helps to fix DNA. It protects cells from damage that can lead to diseases like cancer. And it also assists in metabolism and contributes to the health of skin, tendons, and ligaments. So we need sulfur. So basically, bitumen is good. Probably not mummies. Shouldn't eat mummies. But bitumen is good. It was used at some point for mummifying, but not for the royals that the Europeans thought they were eating. It was more commonly used for slaves or just common folk. There was this one quote that I read that was like, someone went to go buy the mummies or the bitumen from them, like from the suppliers, and this one, he was just like, oh, where'd you get that? Like, was that a royal? And the dude was just like, no, I made this myself. I think it's funny because like they really didn't know where they were coming from. They just went and bought mummies. Like they could have been from anywhere. Bitumen was used to mummify commoners, and it protected the mummies from moisture, insects, and bacteria and fungi. Basically, they started mummifying bodies when they realized that they were burying these people in the sands near the Dead Sea, and the bodies were being preserved. So they tried to mimic the process, and that's how they came up with mummifying. Antimicrobial properties helped prevent decay as well. Ptolemy Pyrrhus wrote that some merchants would pass off toasted camel flesh for human flesh, and other merchants would create their own mummies from the freshly deceased. So they would like go out into, like, even unlawfully, they would go out into cemeteries and find fresh bodies that were buried and just dig them up and mummify them instead of, you know. This whole process was classified as something called corpse medicine, which contains basically any form of recently dead human flesh, bone, secretions, and excretions, blood, powdered skull, fat, menstrual blood, placenta, earwax, brain, urine, and even feces, which, that's disgusting. But to be fair, Europeans didn't know what the hell was going on. There were some doctors that when people would get the bubonic plague, they would tell them to drain their abscesses and drink the fluids that were inside to help fight it. Europeans were stupid. Everybody was stupid. In 1643, an epileptic seeking a remedy might turn to Oswald Kroll's Basilica Camica, a recipe for it's a weird word. Antiepileptic confection of Paracelsus, and the central ingredient for that consisted of unburied skulls of 3 men who died violent deaths. Why they had to be violent, I don't know, but apparently that was the best way to do it. And how can they justify this? And say it's not cannibalism? They basically said it's for medicine, not for food. That was their justification. Most modern corpses used came from executed murderers. Great Britain's Murder Act of 1752 allowed executed murderers to be dissected. They liked this because it denied murderers a proper burial and provided bodies for anatomical research and medical education. After dissection, bodies went to apothecaries to be made into medicine, which basically means they just mummified them. Jeremy Bentham, who's a philosopher and father of utilitarianism, not utilitarianism, utilitarianism, took steps to change the stigma and fear that only bad people are used for dissection when he donated his body to science in 1832 and was the first to do so. In 1824, Bentham's friend Thomas Southwood Smith published Use of the Dead to the Living, which detailed the difficulties school faced in obtaining bodies for their students to dissect. Bentham had already decided to donate his body, but the pamphlet helped him draft legislation that inspired the Anatomy Act of 1832, which permitted anyone with legal custody of a body to donate it for dissection. Bentham turned his body over to Smith and told him to dissect it publicly and then preserve the head and stuff the body in as lifelike a manner as possible. Smith failed in his mummification of Bentham's head, and to carry out Bentham's wishes, Smith asked anatomical modeler Jacques Tabric to create a lifelike wax model of his head. The body was stuffed, and the wax head was attached to Bentham's own attached to the body, and Bentham's own clothes and hat placed on his body. He now sits in a mahogany case in public view at the University College of London. The failed mummified head is stored in a climate-controlled room in the college's archaeology division. And mummy unwrapping parties existed, and royalty used to throw mummy unwrapping parties, and those still happened as late as 1834 in England and 1857 in France. So, like I said, I don't know when they stopped eating mummies. I know that I'm sure some cultures still do. This was mainly just about European version of it. But I don't know when they stopped. I do know they stopped using mummies for paint in about the 1960s, and it's mainly just because they ran out of mummies. They ran out of mummies to use. So now we're going to talk about paint. Mummy brown was popular in the 16th and 17th centuries, and it was made from white pitch, myrrh, and ground up remains of ancient Egyptian mummies and Guanche mummies of the Canary Islands. They also used those Guanche mummies for the medicine as well. It had good transparency. It can be used for glazes and shadows and flesh tones and shading. It had a tendency to crack though, and it was variable in composition and quality. It contained ammonia and particles of fat, and it made it affect other colors. High demand for the pigment sometimes outweighed the supply of mummies, and it led to the use of corpses as slaves and criminals, which, like I said before, that's what they turned to when they ran out. Use dropped off in the 19th century because people found out where it was coming from. Apparently, they didn't believe that it was coming from actual mummies, and even though they were likely using it for medicine, they didn't want to use it for paint. Don't understand that. Edward Burne-Jones reported that he ceremonially buried his last tube of mummy brown in his garden when he found out its origin. By 1915, demand slowed so much that one London colorman said he could meet the demands of customers for 20 years with one mummy, because so few people were asking for it. It falls somewhere between raw umber's nearly green-brown and burnt umber's ruddy tone. It fades easily, and the process of making muddy brown as a paint didn't stop until the 1960s, like I said, when paint companies ran out. There are a couple paintings I can show you. The first painting I'm going to show you is by Martin Drolling. It's called The Interior of a Kitchen, and it used a lot of mummy brown. Hold on. I know there's a glare. I'll probably try and figure out how to put this up at the end of the video. But there's that one. There's a lot of browns, as you can see, so it used a lot of mummy brown. The second one is, it's called Liberty Leading the People. It's by Eugene Delacroix. It also used some mummy brown. You can look up some more. There's plenty that used it because they didn't understand where it was coming from, so they just kept using it because they liked the way that it worked. But yeah, so that's the history of using mummies in medicine and as paint. And there's probably a lot more. I'm no expert. This is just me looking up random facts about random information. If you want to know anything more, if you want me to talk about a certain topic, just leave a comment down below and I will read it and I will try and look into it and get back to you on it. The next video that I will be doing is going to be about Hatshepsut, which was an Egyptian female pharaoh, and basically how they tried to erase her from history. But she's cool. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe or comment or whatever. Share. Show your friends. Tell them that Europeans used to eat mummies for medicine because we were smart.